Hi everyone and welcome back. Thanks for joining. If you think that politics is left versus right, they've already got you completely fooled. Because if you're picking a side, if you're thinking that you're on the left, or if you're thinking that you're on the right, you've already lost the game. You've already fallen for the trap. I want to show you a really good example, one that's just happened over the weekend. I'm going to use the March for Australia rallies, which occurred across the country on the weekend. Now, here in Melbourne, there was significant trouble from counter-protesters who are on the left. The media don't call the rally March for Australia. The media call it anti-immigration rallies. You've all seen it. Now, we know by now that the media don't report the truth. They're not interested in truth. They're sensationalists. They're selling papers. We know that. Let's have a look at some of the headlines. Here's an article from before the rallies took place. Australia's far right are on the march. So that's pretty obvious. Anyone who marched on the weekend's obviously framed as far right. We've got another headline here. Anti-mass immigration rallies in Melbourne turn violent as police assaulted by demonstrators. Now, if I didn't read this article, if I just looked at the headline, to me, it sounds like it was actually the people at the March for Australia rally who were turning violent and attacking the police. Did anyone else catch that, or is that just me? But when you read the article, it says capsicum spray was deployed on counter-protesters. So we've got left versus right here. We've got a left versus right issue here. If we have a look at this article here from Headmaster Jacinta Allen, she blames a very small number of counter-protesters for violence at Melbourne's immigration rally. So Jacinta's playing it down. That's because Jacinta's on the left. She plays the left side. So these counter-protesters have set up their own rally and they've dubbed it United Against Migrants and Refugees Are Welcome. But they attacked police with bottles, broken glass and bricks. And our Premier says just a very small number. Well, that's not quite how it sounded from the Deputy Commissioner. Let's have a listen.
This is what was thrown at police today, and I think Melbourne has had a gutful. I look on the social media streaming platforms of some of these issue-motivated groups that are saying police used excessive force. The fact was, these were being thrown at police. Bottles filled with shards of glass were being thrown at the police. Rotten fruit was being thrown at police. Bins were put on fire. Flags were on fire. And I think, really enough's enough. People came to pick a fight with the police. The people that came to pick the fight with police were the issue-motivated groups on the left. I can tell you that the March for Australia group, they were peaceful, they were engaging, they listened to our instructions, they did what they were told, and they protested by example.
So he says the March for Australia protesters were really well behaved. The groups on the left were the ones who were violent. Look at that, he's burning an Australian flag. All right, so the thing that we're all missing here is that it's not the protesters. It's not even the counter-protesters. It's not the left, and it's not the right either. It's not immigration. It's not patriots. It's not police versus the public. It's the system that is keeping everybody fighting. And look, this divide is deliberately manufactured. Left and right is a construct. The game itself is not actually left versus right. The game is the powerful versus you, the public. And you're the public. And let me show you the formula that they use. First, flood the country with an issue. Think of something that people are going to react to, that are going to get a bit heated about. Mass immigration, inflation, housing, cost of living, a health crisis we've had recently, a crime surge or a crime wave, whatever it might be. Anything to just get your juices flowing. The second thing is to wait. Just wait for a minute. You won't have to wait long, but wait for the public to split into two groups, to split and divide into left and right, left versus right, pro versus anti, safety versus freedom, compassion versus sovereignty. The third thing that needs to be done is to clearly label each side in the most extreme way possible. We all know the terms that they use for the far right. We all know the terms that they use for the far left. That's called labelling. And what does that actually do? What does it achieve? What it does is it separates and it divides society. And it's very, very deliberate. And the fourth thing is, from this division, is to make them to hate each other so that they never look up and see the puppet master up the top there pulling the strings. And look, this isn't conspiracy. This is just how the system works. This is the divide and conquer method, which goes all the way back to Rome. This is Roman Empire 101. The Romans didn't just win wars with swords and weapons, they won with psychology. They understood something that modern governments and our media are still using today, and very effectively. And it's far easier to rule people who are busy fighting and arguing with each other than people who are united together. See, when Rome entered a region, they didn't always destroy their enemies completely. They studied their enemies. They found out who had old rivalries, who felt cheated, who felt superior. Then they fed those divisions. They fed them, made them worse. They'd support one tribe over another, promise land to one group, and then they'd promise protection to another group. They'd spread rumours, create distrust, and then they'd sit back while the two sides weakened each other. And by the time Rome's ready to roll in, the people are just exhausted. They're divided. They're desperate for some kind of stability. And Rome arrives as the solution. Does this sound familiar? The genius itself wasn't dividing the enemies, it was conquering without them even realising it. The same idea applies in chess. If you play chess, you can let your opponent take your knight, maybe let him take your rook or even your queen. Go on, take it. Let them think that they're doing well, let them think that they're winning, but your sacrifice leads to some kind of surprise checkmate that no one saw coming, all out of nowhere. So Rome kept their conquered populations under very good control by making sure that they never saw each other as allies. They set up social classes. They rewarded loyalty to the empire and punished any attempt to unify people. They allowed just enough freedom for people to feel like they had some kind of control, that they could make some kind of decision, while only really making sure that Rome had the power. Rome had control over the money, over the law, over the military, over the food supply. And the result? Millions of people happily sitting under Roman rule without Rome needing to fight them every day or do anything about it at all. Why? Because the people were too busy fighting with each other. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The Roman Empire may have collapsed 1500 years ago, but the strategy that they use lives on today. Today, it just looks like, what have we got? Left versus right, race versus race, worker versus employer. You've got all your unions, compliant person versus the non-compliant person, the citizen versus the police, the protester versus the counter-protester. So every time we start fighting each other, or every day that we continue fighting with each other, the real power stays hidden and goes unchallenged. If you can divide the people, you can conquer the nation. You can rule without resistance. That's the Roman formula. And it still runs the world. See, here in the West, authorities, media are generally left-leaning. But now, after this weekend, well, the police are showing a fair bit of bias to the right because they were attacked by the left. So at the moment, the left are getting a bit of a hiding. Even the media are very, very reluctantly reporting on this. So reluctantly, you can see it. They are reluctant to say that their favourite left-wing counterpart protesters were the ones who were violent and caused all this trouble. They hate reporting that. They want to blame the right, but they have to say it, and this gives away the game. And that's when you know that the game is way more complex than simply just left or right. They're repositioning the battlefield because the real power isn't political sides. Here's where the real power is. Central banks, right? Global institutions, the World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank of International Settlements. I don't know whether many people have even heard of that bank, but it's worth looking into. The World Health Organization. It's also corporate media machines, big tech, data control, laws, legislation, bills, fear. Left and right are just costumes, just part of the game. And the truth is that most Australians are sick of mass immigration. Not sick of immigration, right? Sick of mass, unchecked immigration. There's a big difference here. When I say Australians, I'm talking about people from all different ethnic backgrounds, not just white Australia. We generally don't mind some form of sensible immigration. We're all immigrants in one way or another. So these Aussies that went out and marched on the weekend, they're marching because of issues that matter to them, like the cost of housing, the cost of living, their jobs, their culture. And I think one of the biggest things is the lack of leadership that we have. And the left comes in and weaponizes that frustration. They label you. The right hijacks that frustration and says, come and join our side. And the media is just cooking up and crafting up the narrative in the background. And police, they enforce whichever side stabilises the system. Government pretends to protect you. All the while, they are selling you out. We live in a beautiful country here in Australia. It is an amazing country. There's so much to see. Only issue is that we don't have any leadership whatsoever. We are a ship without a rudder. We're just sailing aimlessly through nowhere. And I think it's time that we as the public woke up. No one in any country really wants any kind of division. We don't want this left versus right garbage. We don't want riots. We don't want to be out protesting every weekend. We'd probably rather be out spending time with our families, right? Who wants any of that? What Australians want, and what any normal person in any society is going to want, is truth, fairness, safety, national identity, economic stability, freedom, a future for our kids, and if it's not too much to ask, maybe some logic and intelligence from our leadership, right? We just want unity and sanity, but the system thrives on division and insanity. Guys, thanks again for watching. Make sure that you hit like and subscribe if you thought the video was good. Share it with someone who you think needs to hear it, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.